They told me I could keep my children until they turned 15. What they did not tell me was that I would have to give up everything else to do it. My name is Rachel Martinez, and I am an American mother who fell in love with an Egyptian man, moved halfway across the world, and learned too late that love does not always protect you, that sometimes the law can take everything you have, piece by piece, until you are left with an impossible choice. Stay and lose yourself, or leave and lose your children. This is my story, and I am telling it because I want you to understand what happens when you marry across cultures without knowing what you are really signing up for. When you trust that love will be enough. When you believe that modern times mean modern protections. When you think that because someone says they respect you, the law will too. I was wrong about all of it, and I paid for those mistakes with years of my life, my freedom, and almost my children. I met Kareem Hassan on a study abroad trip to Cairo when I was 23 years old. It was the spring semester of my senior year at UC Berkeley, and I had always been fascinated by ancient Egypt. The pyramids, the temples, the hieroglyphics, the golden treasures of Tutankhamun. It felt like magic to me, like stepping into another world where history was not just something you read about in books, but something you could touch and feel and breathe. The program was 6 weeks long. We stayed in dorms near the American University in Cairo, took classes on Egyptian history and archaeology, and spent our weekends visiting sites around the country. I was completely in my element, taking thousands of photos, filling notebook after notebook with observations and sketches. Kareem was our tour guide for a week-long excursion to Luxor and Aswan. He was 27, had studied Egyptology at Cairo University, and worked for a tour company that specialized in educational trips. He spoke perfect English with a slight British accent from his time studying abroad in London. He was handsome in that effortless way some men are, with dark eyes that seemed to see right through you and a warm smile that made you feel like you were the most interesting person he had ever met. On the first day of the tour, he made everyone laugh with stories about ancient pharaohs that made them feel like real people instead of distant historical figures. He knew everything about every temple, every tomb, every carving on every wall. But more than that, he knew how to make it come alive. He would stand in the Valley of the Kings and tell stories about Ramses II or Hatshepsut in a way that made you forget you were in the 21st century. We started talking after the tours ended each day. He would invite small groups of us to local cafes, places tourists never went, where we would drink sweet mint tea and eat koshari and talk about everything. Egyptian politics, American culture, the differences between our worlds, the surprising similarities. He was thoughtful, well-read, curious about everything. By the third day, I realized I was looking forward to seeing him more than I was looking forward to seeing the ancient sites. By the fifth day, we were having conversations that lasted long after everyone else had gone back to the hotel. By the last day of the tour, when we were standing on the deck of a felucca sailing down the Nile at sunset, he kissed me. He said, "I think you are the woman I have been waiting for my whole life. Will you come back to me after your program ends?" I said yes without even thinking about it. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. We did long distance for 6 months after I graduated and moved back to California. Video calls every single day, sometimes twice a day. Love letters that took 2 weeks to arrive. He sent me a gold bracelet with my name engraved in Arabic. I sent him a photo album of us together that I had made by hand, with captions in both English and my very bad Arabic. It felt epic, romantic, like something from a movie. My friends said I was crazy, that long distance never works, that I barely knew him, but I felt like I knew him better than I had known anyone. We talked for hours about everything. Our childhoods, our dreams, our fears, our beliefs about the world. He told me about growing up in a middle-class family in Cairo, about his father who was an accountant and his mother who was a teacher, about his 2 younger sisters who were both in university. When he asked me to marry him over video call 6 months after I left Egypt, I said yes immediately. My parents were worried. They asked questions I did not want to answer or did not know how to answer. What about cultural differences? What about religion? What about your career? What about children? What if things do not work out? I told them love was enough. I told them Kareem was different, modern, educated. I told them they did not understand. Looking back now, I realized they were asking all the right questions. I just did not want to hear the answers. I flew back to Cairo 3 months later, and we got married in a small ceremony at a mosque in Zamalek. I wore a white dress and a hijab that Kareem's mother Amina had given me. It was beautiful, cream-colored silk with delicate embroidery. Wearing it felt respectful, felt like I was honoring his culture, felt like I was becoming part of something bigger than myself. His family was warm and welcoming at the wedding. His mother hugged me and called me her daughter. His father shook my hand formally and said welcome to our family. His sisters giggled and asked me questions about America in their limited English. Everyone seemed genuinely happy that Kareem had found someone, even if that someone was an American. We lived in Cairo in an apartment in Zamalek, a nice neighborhood near the Nile, popular with expats and upper-middle-class Egyptians. Kareem was working in tourism management for a large company. I got a job teaching English at a language school. Our life felt full and happy and exciting. We would walk along the Corniche at sunset, the river glowing orange and gold. We would eat koshari from street vendors, sitting on plastic chairs on the sidewalk. We would visit museums on our days off, and Kareem would still play tour guide, telling me stories I had not heard before. I started wearing hijab full-time, not because Kareem asked me to, but because I wanted to fit in. I wanted his family to accept me. I wanted to show respect for the culture I was now part of. I wanted to honor his faith, even though I had not converted to Islam. Kareem never pressured me to convert. He said religion was between me and God, that he loved me regardless. I even started learning Arabic seriously, beyond the tourist phrases I had picked up. I took classes 3 times a week. I practiced with Kareem's mother when she came to visit. It was hard, one of the hardest things I had ever done, but I was determined to make this work, to make Egypt my home. When I got pregnant 2 years into our marriage, Kareem was overjoyed. We found out we were having a girl, and I could see the slight disappointment flicker across his face even though he tried to hide it. His whole family wanted a grandson so badly. There was so much pressure around the gender of the baby, so many comments from his aunts and cousins about how the first child should be a boy. But when Layla was born on a hot August morning, Kareem cried when he held her. He said she was perfect. And for a while, I believed that maybe gender did not matter as much as I had feared. Layla was 6 pounds, 8 ounces. She had dark hair like her father and my green eyes. I fell in love with her instantly, completely, in a way I had not known was possible. The first time I held her, I made promises to her in my head. I promised I would protect her. I promised I would give her every opportunity. I promised she would grow up knowing she was loved and valued and could be anything she wanted to be. I had no idea how hard it would be to keep those promises. The first cracks in our marriage started showing after Layla was born. Amina, Kareem's mother, started coming over every single day, sometimes twice a day. She would let herself in with the key Kareem had given her without asking me. I would wake up to find her in my kitchen, making tea, tidying things, rearranging my cabinets. She had opinions about everything. The way I held Layla, the way I fed her, the way I dressed her, the way I talked to her. Everything I did was wrong, according to Amina. She would tell me Egyptian mothers did things differently, that I needed to learn their ways, that I was too soft, too American, too permissive. Kareem would not stand up for me. When I tried to talk to him about it, he would say his mother was just trying to help, that she had raised 5 children successfully, that I should be grateful for her experience and guidance, that this was how Egyptian families worked. Everyone was involved. Everyone had opinions, and I needed to accept that. But it did not feel like help. It felt like I was being slowly erased from my own life. like I was just an incubator who had delivered a baby for Kareem's family, and now they were taking over because I clearly did not know what I was doing. When Layla was 6 months old, I got pregnant again. This time, it was a boy, Omar. Kareem was ecstatic. His family was ecstatic. Finally, a son to carry on the family name, to be the man of the next generation. The relief and joy were palpable. It felt like I had finally done something right in their eyes. Omar was born 15 months after Layla. He was 8 pounds, 2 ounces. A big, healthy baby boy. Kareem's father actually smiled at me for the first time since I had known him. Amina cooked a huge feast to celebrate. For a few weeks, I felt like maybe I had earned my place in the family. But Omar was a difficult baby. He cried all the time, barely slept, would not nurse well. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, drowning in the demands of a newborn and a 15-month-old. I asked Kareem for help. He said taking care of babies was women's work, that I should ask his mother for help if I was struggling. So Amina moved in with us, officially to help with the babies. But really, she took over completely. She told me when to feed them, when to put them down for naps, what to dress them in, how to talk to them. She criticized me constantly. She told Kareem I was not a good mother, that I did not know how to raise Egyptian children, that she needed to teach me. I started to feel like a guest in my own home, like I was being allowed to live there only because I had provided the grandchildren Kareem's family wanted. When the children got a little older, Amina started insisting they speak only Arabic at home. She said if they learned too much English, they would become too Western, too American. They would lose their Egyptian identity. Kareem agreed with her completely. I tried to argue. I said these are my children too. They should know both languages, both cultures. They should understand where I come from, not just where Kareem comes from. Kareem got angry. He said we live in Egypt now. The children are Egyptian. They will be raised as Egyptians. My way of doing things, my culture, my language, those things were fine for America, but they had no place in his children's lives. I felt something break inside me then, a realization that I had given up everything to be here. My country, my career, my language, my culture, my sense of self. And it still was not enough. It would never be enough. Things got worse when Layla turned 4 and Omar turned 3. Amina started talking about how Layla needed to learn to be modest, to cover herself properly, to behave like a good Muslim girl. She was 4 years old, and they wanted her to start wearing hijab. They wanted her to stop playing rough with Omar, to sit quietly and learn to help in the kitchen, to understand that her role was different from her brother's role. I said absolutely not. I said Layla is a child. Let her be a child. Let her play and run and explore. Do not put these restrictions on her when she is so young. Kareem said I was being difficult, that I did not understand Egyptian culture, Islamic culture, that I was trying to impose American values on children who were not American, that I needed to stop fighting his family on everything and accept the way things were done here. We fought constantly after that, screaming fights that scared the children, fights about how to raise them, about religion, about culture, about his mother's constant presence and control. Fights about money because I had stopped working to take care of the babies and now had no financial independence. Fights about everything and nothing. By the time Layla was 5 and Omar was 4, I realized I could not stay. I could not keep living like this. I was miserable. I felt trapped, controlled, erased. I felt like I was watching my daughter being molded into something I had never wanted for her. I felt like I was losing myself piece by piece. I started researching options. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I would sit in the bathroom with my phone and search for information. Leaving abusive relationships in Egypt, taking children out of Egypt, international custody laws, divorce in Egypt for foreign wives. That was when I learned about the challenges I would face. Egypt is not a Hague Convention country, which meant there was no international treaty to help me if I tried to take the children. Egyptian custody law follows Islamic principles. Mothers typically have physical custody of young children until a certain age, boys until they are about 7 to 9, girls until they are about 9 to 11. But fathers always retain legal guardianship and control major decisions. If I tried to leave Egypt with the children without Kareem's permission, it would be considered kidnapping. The Egyptian government would issue warrants. The US government would pressure me to return them. I could lose custody completely. I could go to prison. But if I stayed, if I just tried to divorce Kareem and remain in Egypt, I would still be at his mercy. He would control everything about the children's lives, where they went to school, what religion they practiced, whether they could travel, everything. And I would be alone in a country where I had no family, no real support system, no leverage. I felt utterly trapped. Every option was bad. Every path led to pain. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon when Layla was 5. Kareem got angry at me over something small. I cannot even remember what. Maybe I had made plans without asking him first. Maybe I had questioned one of Amina's decisions. It does not matter. What matters is that he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises, and he slammed me against the wall. Layla saw it. She started screaming, "Daddy, stop hurting Mommy!" Omar started crying, confused and scared by the chaos. Kareem let me go immediately and walked out of the apartment without a word. Layla ran to me, crying, asking if I was okay. I held her and lied and said I was fine. Everything was fine. Daddy just got upset. But it was over now. But it was not fine. Nothing was fine. And in that moment, I knew I had to get my children out of Egypt. I could not let them grow up seeing this. I could not let Layla think this was normal. I could not let Omar learn that this was how men treat women. I made a plan. It took weeks. I researched obsessively. I learned that Spain had strong domestic violence protections and was sympathetic to women fleeing abuse. I learned that if I could just get to Spain, if I could tell my story to a court there, maybe, just maybe, they would help me instead of sending us back. I knew Kareem could file under the Hague Convention to have the children returned to Egypt. Wait, no. Egypt was not a Hague signatory, but there were other mechanisms. Diplomatic pressure, police cooperation. I was not entirely sure how it all worked. I just knew that staying felt impossible, and leaving felt like the only option. I told Kareem I wanted to take the children to visit my parents in California, that we had not seen them in years, that my mom was not doing well, which was true. She had been having health problems. I begged him to let us go for 3 weeks. He said no immediately. He said he did not trust me. He said he thought I would take the children to America and not come back. I cried. I pleaded. I said my mom really needed to see her grandchildren, that it had been so long, that it would mean everything to her. Amina surprisingly backed me up. She told Kareem I seemed very unhappy lately, that maybe some time with my family would make me settle down, make me more content, less difficult. Kareem finally agreed. 2 weeks, not 3, and I had to promise to call him every day, to send photos constantly, to come back exactly when I said I would. I bought plane tickets to California with a layover in Madrid. I did not book the connecting flight. I planned to not get on that plane. I planned to stay in Spain and seek help there. I packed carefully. Not too much. Nothing that would make Kareem suspicious. Just enough clothes for what looked like a short trip. I left behind most of our belongings, including things that mattered to me. Photos, jewelry my grandmother had given me, letters from my parents. I could not risk him realizing what I was actually planning. The morning we left for the airport, I held both children tight. Layla asked why I was crying. I said I was just so happy we were going to see Grandma and Grandpa. Omar asked if Daddy was coming. I said no, just us this time. But we would see Daddy soon. Kareem drove us to the airport. He kissed the children goodbye. He kissed me and said, 2 weeks, Emily. Not a day longer. You promised. I said, I know. I promise. I meant it in that moment. Or maybe I did not. I do not know anymore. All I know is that I was terrified and desperate and felt like I had no other choice. The flight to Madrid was 14 hours. Layla and Omar slept for most of it, curled up next to me in the cramped economy seats. I did not sleep at all. I just stared out the window at the darkness, thinking about what I was about to do, thinking about how my entire life was about to change, thinking about whether I was making the biggest mistake of my life or the bravest decision I had ever made. When we landed in Madrid, I did not go to the gate for our connecting flight to San Francisco. Instead, I took Layla and Omar and our luggage and walked out of the airport into a city I had never been to before, in a country where I barely spoke the language, with no concrete plan except to find help. I had researched a women's shelter in Madrid before leaving Egypt, one that specialized in helping victims of domestic violence. I had an address written on a piece of paper hidden in my wallet. I took a taxi there. The shelter was in a nondescript building in a suburb outside the city center. It had bars on the windows and cameras at the door. The women who ran it were kind but firm. They explained the rules. No contact with the outside world without permission. No sharing our location with anyone. Mandatory counseling sessions twice a week. They would help me find a lawyer. Layla was confused. She kept asking when we were going to see Grandma and Grandpa. I told her we had changed our plans, that we were having an adventure in Spain first. She accepted it the way children do, without questioning too deeply. For 3 days, I let myself believe we were safe, that maybe this would actually work, that maybe I could get a job here, learn Spanish properly, build a new life for us. Maybe the courts here would understand. Maybe they would help us. Then I received the papers. Karim had filed something. Not under the Hague Convention, because Egypt was not a signatory. But he had contacted Interpol. He had filed reports with the Egyptian police. He had gotten the U.S. Embassy involved. Pressure was being applied from multiple directions. And more importantly, he had filed something in Spanish courts through diplomatic channels claiming I had abducted the children. Spain and Egypt had some sort of judicial cooperation agreement. The Spanish courts were ordering me to appear for a hearing. The shelter helped me find a lawyer, a woman named Carmen Rodriguez, who specialized in international family law and domestic violence cases. She was in her 50s with kind eyes but a very straightforward manner. She sat me down in a small office at a legal aid clinic and said, "Tell me everything." And I did. I told her about Karim's controlling behavior, about Amina's constant presence and criticism, about the incident where he grabbed me, about my fear for what my children's lives would become if we stayed in Egypt, about everything. Carmen listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, she said, "I need you to understand something very important, Emily. What you did, taking your children out of Egypt without your husband's permission and not going to the destination you said you were going to, that is considered parental abduction under international law. Spain has agreements with Egypt about these matters. Karim is going to argue that you kidnapped his children, and Spanish courts may be sympathetic to that argument." I said, "But I was fleeing abuse. That has to count for something, right?" She said, "Yes, it counts for something. But these cases are complicated. Spanish courts will have to weigh your claims of abuse against Egypt's right to have custody matters decided in Egyptian courts. I will do everything I can, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that the court might order you to return the children to Egypt." I felt like I might throw up. I said, "But if we go back, I will lose them. Egyptian courts will side with Karim. I will have no power, no rights." Carmen said, "I know. That is why we need to build the strongest case possible. Do you have any evidence of the abuse? Photos, medical records, anything?" I showed her what I had. Photos of the bruises on my arm from when Karim grabbed me. Some text messages where he was controlling about my whereabouts. A few emails where I had confided in a friend back home about how unhappy I was. It was not much. It felt like it would never be enough. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In those 3 weeks, I barely slept. Carmen and I met multiple times to prepare. She explained that we needed to prove several things. That I had been fleeing genuine abuse, not just an unhappy marriage. That returning to Egypt would put me and the children at grave risk. That it was in the children's best interest to remain in Spain rather than be sent back to Egypt. She warned me that Karim would have lawyers too, that he would paint me as unstable, as a kidnapper, as someone who had stolen his children out of spite, that he would present himself as a devoted father who just wanted his children back. On the day of the hearing, I dressed carefully. Conservative clothes, nothing flashy. I wanted to look like a responsible mother, not like someone who had done something crazy and impulsive. Karim was there with his lawyer, a Spanish man who specialized in international cases. Karim looked good. He was wearing a suit, his hair was perfectly styled, and he looked like the picture of a concerned father. When he saw me, his face showed pain, betrayal, sadness. He was performing for the judge, and he was good at it. His lawyer went first. He presented the case methodically. Emily Carter took her 2 children, Egyptian citizens, out of Egypt under false pretenses. She claimed she was traveling to the United States to visit family. Instead, she diverted to Spain and has been hiding here for 3 weeks, refusing all contact with the father. She has violated Egyptian law, violated the father's rights, and caused immense emotional harm to him. The lawyer presented evidence that Karim was a fit father. Letters from his employer saying he was a good employee. Letters from neighbors saying he was a devoted father. Photos of him with Layla and Omar, smiling, happy. He made Karim look like a victim. Then it was our turn. Carmen presented my evidence of abuse, the photos of bruises, the text messages, the testimony from the women's shelter about my state when I arrived. She presented expert testimony from a psychologist who had evaluated me and the children, saying that we showed signs of trauma, that the children exhibited anxiety when Karim's name was mentioned. Carmen argued that under Spanish law and under international human rights law, I had a right to flee abuse, that forcing me to return to Egypt would put me in danger and would not be in the children's best interests. I took the stand. I testified about what my life had been like in Egypt, about Amina's control, about Karim's anger, about feeling trapped, about watching my daughter being molded into something I had not wanted for her, about fearing for our safety and our futures. Karim's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively. He pointed out that I had lived in Egypt for years without complaining, that I had never filed a police report about abuse before leaving, that I had lied to Karim about where I was taking the children, that I had planned this for weeks, which proved it was not a panicked escape, but a calculated kidnapping. If you were really afraid for your life, he said, why did you not seek help in Egypt? Why did you not go to the police there? Why did you not file for divorce in Egyptian courts? Why did you not try to work within the system? I tried to explain. That I did not trust the Egyptian system. That as a foreign woman, I had no power there. That I had tried to make it work for years, and it had only gotten worse. But even as I said it, I could hear how it sounded. Like excuses. Like rationalizations for doing something illegal. The hearing lasted 2 days. At the end, the judge said she would take time to consider all the evidence and issue a ruling within 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I existed in a state of constant anxiety. The children could sense something was wrong. Layla kept asking when we were going to see Daddy. Omar kept asking when we were going home. I did not have good answers for them. When the ruling came, Carmen called me to come to her office. I knew from her voice that it was not good news. The judge has ordered the children to be returned to Egypt, Carmen said gently. I am so sorry, Emily. I felt like the world was ending. I said, what about the abuse? What about everything I testified to? Carmen said, "The judge acknowledged your testimony and said she believed you had been in a difficult situation. But she said that the proper place to resolve custody matters is in Egypt, where the children are residents. She said Spain cannot override Egypt's right to determine custody of Egyptian children. She ordered you to return Layla and Omar to Egypt within 72 hours, or Spanish authorities will enforce the order. I said, if I take them back, I will lose them. Egyptian courts will side with Karim. I will have nothing." Carmen said, "I know. I am so sorry. We can appeal, but appeals in these cases rarely succeed, and the children cannot stay in Spain in the meantime. The order is immediate." I had 72 hours to decide what to do. I thought about running, about taking the children and disappearing into Spain, going to some small village where no one would find us. But Carmen warned me that if I became a fugitive, I would be arrested eventually. And when I was, I would lose the children completely. Karim would get full custody, and I might never see them again. She said the only option was to comply, to take the children back to Egypt and fight for custody there, to hope that Egyptian courts would be fair, even though we both knew they probably would not be. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I got on a plane back to Egypt with Layla and Omar. Karim was waiting at Cairo airport with his lawyer and his parents. The moment we cleared customs, he approached us. His face was cold, triumphant. A police officer was with them. The officer informed me that Karim had obtained an emergency custody order from an Egyptian court, that Layla and Omar would be going home with their father tonight, that I was not to interfere. I said, "No. No, I came back. I complied with the Spanish court order. You cannot just take them from me." But they could, and they did. Karim took Layla from my arms. She screamed. She reached for me, crying, "Mommy, Mommy, please do not let him take me." Amina took Omar, who was too young to really understand what was happening, but started crying because Layla was crying. I tried to hold on to them. The police officer stepped between us. He said, "Ma'am, you need to let them go, or you will be arrested." I stood there in that airport, watching my children being carried away from me, and I felt like I was dying. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart. I was served with custody papers the next day. Karim was seeking full custody, claiming I was mentally unstable and had proven myself to be a flight risk by abducting the children. His lawyer was asking for supervised visitation only, if any visitation at all. I had to find a lawyer in Egypt quickly. I had very little money left. I had maxed out my credit cards on the Spanish lawyer. I called my parents and they helped as much as they could financially, but they were not wealthy. They scraped together what they could. I found an Egyptian lawyer named Hanan, who had experience with international custody cases. She was honest with me from the start. "This is going to be very difficult," she said. "Egyptian courts favor fathers, especially Egyptian fathers. And the fact that you took the children out of the country without permission weighs very heavily against you. The court will see that as evidence that you cannot be trusted." The custody battle lasted 9 months. 9 months of living in Cairo in a tiny apartment I could barely afford, working whatever jobs I could find to pay for the lawyer, seeing my children only during supervised visits. The supervised visits were in a sterile room at a family services center, 2 hours per week, with a social worker taking notes on everything I said and did. Layla would cry every time I had to leave. Omar barely remembered me as his mother anymore. He was only 3, and we had been apart for weeks, then months. To him, Mommy was Grandma Amina now. The custody hearings were brutal. Karim's lawyers painted me as a crazy American who could not handle a strong Egyptian man. They said I had made up abuse allegations to justify my plan to kidnap the children. They presented character witnesses, all Karim's friends and family, testifying that he was a devoted father who had never shown any signs of violence. My evidence was picked apart. The photos of bruises could have come from anywhere, they argued. The text messages were taken out of context. The testimony from the Spanish women's shelter was irrelevant because it came after I had already committed the abduction. The fact that I had fled to Spain instead of seeking help through proper Egyptian legal channels was used against me repeatedly. It proved I did not respect Egyptian law. It proved I was willing to lie and deceive. It proved I could not be trusted with the children. Hanan did her best. She presented testimony from domestic violence experts explaining why women flee instead of going through official channels. She showed the patterns of control in my marriage. She argued that I had done what I thought was necessary to protect my children. But the judge was not sympathetic. At the final hearing, he said, "Whatever difficulties existed in this marriage, the mother's choice to remove the children from Egypt without the father's knowledge or permission was a serious violation of law and of the father's rights. The mother has demonstrated extremely poor judgment and a willingness to prioritize her own desires over the children's need for stability and relationship with their father and paternal family." The judge gave Karim primary physical and legal custody. I was granted visitation, 4 days per month, supervised for the first year. The supervision would be reviewed after a year based on my cooperation and stability. 4 days per month, supervised, with my own children. I felt like I had been gutted. Hanan said we could appeal, but she was not optimistic. Egyptian appellate courts almost never reversed custody decisions, especially in cases involving parental abduction. I could not afford to appeal anyway. I had no money left. I had massive debt from the legal fees in Spain and Egypt. I was barely surviving, so I accepted the ruling. I showed up for every single supervised visit. I was perfect, calm, engaged, loving. I did everything the social workers suggested. I took parenting classes even though I did not need them. I attended therapy. I did everything right. After a year, the supervision was lifted. My visitation was increased to alternating weekends, Friday evening through Sunday evening, plus 1 weeknight dinner per week. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was what I had. That was 3 years ago. Layla is now 10 years old. Omar is 9. I see them every other weekend and every Wednesday evening for dinner. Layla is smart and funny, but has anxiety that breaks my heart. She asks me questions I do not always know how to answer. "Why did you take us to Spain, Mommy? Why did Daddy say you kidnapped us? Did you do something bad?" I try to explain in ways she can understand. I tell her that sometimes adults make mistakes when they are scared. That I was trying to keep us safe, but I did it the wrong way. That I love her more than anything in the world, and everything I did was because I love her. She nods, but I can see the confusion in her eyes. I can see that she is trying to make sense of something that does not make sense. Omar does not remember much from before. He was so young. He knows I am his mother, but Amina is the one who raised him day to day. He calls Amina grandma, but she is the one he goes to for comfort. I am more like a fun aunt he sees sometimes. Karim has moved on with his life. He remarried 2 years ago, a young Egyptian woman who Amina adores. They are talking about having more children. I am still in Cairo. I cannot leave. My custody order specifically states that I must remain within 50 kilometers of Karim's residence. If I move farther than that, if I try to leave Egypt, I will be in violation of the order and could lose even my limited visitation rights. So I am trapped here, in a city that was never my home, forever tethered to a man I tried to escape. Unable to see my own parents more than once every few years when they can afford the expensive flight to Cairo. My parents have visited twice since the custody ruling. Both times were painful. Layla and Omar barely know them. They do not speak English well enough to really communicate with their grandparents. My mother cries every time she has to leave. My father gets angry, wants to know how the system could allow this to happen, wants to hire more lawyers and fight harder. But I am tired of fighting. I am tired of losing. I have spent everything I had, financially and emotionally, and I am still here. still limited to every other weekend, still watching my children grow up without me being able to truly parent them. I work 2 jobs now. I teach English at a language school during the day. I do freelance translation work at night. I live in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood far from where Kareem lives, because that is all I can afford. When Layla and Omar come for their weekend visits, they sleep on a mattress on the floor in my living room. They complain sometimes about my apartment, about how small it is, how it does not have all the things Daddy's house has. Kareem lives in a nice villa now in New Cairo, a wealthy suburb. He has a pool, a big yard, multiple bedrooms. I have 700 square feet and windows that face a brick wall. I try not to let it hurt when they compare. I try to make our time together special in other ways. We go to the park. We visit museums. We cook together. I teach them about American culture, about my family, about where I come from. But I can feel them pulling away. I can feel that Kareem's world is becoming their world, and I am becoming increasingly irrelevant. Kareem uses the custody arrangement to punish me whenever he wants. If I say something he does not like, if I push back on one of his decisions about the children, he will suddenly have plans on my visitation weekend and keep the children from me. The court order says he has to follow the schedule, but there is no enforcement mechanism. When I complain to my lawyer, she says we can file a motion for contempt, but it will take months to get a hearing, and by then, the missed visits are already gone. So I stay quiet. I do not push back. I let him make all the major decisions about the children, even though it kills me. He enrolled Layla in a school that emphasizes Islamic education. She comes home from school reciting Quran verses in Arabic. I am glad she is learning, but it also feels like another way she is moving farther from me, from the life I wanted to give her. Omar Hero worships his father. He wants to be just like Daddy when he grows up. He talks about how strong Daddy is, how smart Daddy is, how Daddy knows everything. He talks about how Grandma Amina takes such good care of him, makes his favorite foods, tells him stories about when Daddy was little. When Omar talks about his life, I am barely mentioned. I am not part of the daily routines, the bedtime stories, the morning breakfasts, the school pickups. I am the weekend visitor, the special occasion mother. I have joined online support groups for mothers who have been through similar situations. Women from all over the world who tried to flee with their children, who were Hagued or extradited or forced to return, who lost custody as a result. We share our stories, our pain, our small victories, and our devastating losses. One woman, an American named Jennifer, fled from Australia to the US with her daughter. She was Hagued back, just like I was. She lost primary custody too. She has not given up fighting. She goes back to court every few months trying to get more time. She has spent over $200,000 on lawyers over 5 years. She still only sees her daughter 1 weekend a month. Another woman, British, fled from France with her 2 sons. She managed to stay hidden in the UK for 3 years before she was found. When she was finally located and forced to return the children to France, the French courts gave her ex-husband full custody and gave her no visitation at all for the first year as punishment for the abduction. She did not see her sons for an entire year. When visitation finally resumed, they were angry at her, felt betrayed by her, had been told by their father that she had abandoned them. These stories are heartbreaking. They are also a reminder that my situation, as painful as it is, could have been worse. At least I see my children. At least they know I am their mother, even if I am not the primary one raising them. At least I am still in their lives. But it is not enough. It will never be enough. I think constantly about what I would do differently if I could go back. If I could talk to the Emily who was 23 years old, wide-eyed and in love, standing in the Valley of the Kings listening to Kareem talk about ancient pharaohs. I would tell her to be careful. I would tell her that love is not always enough. I would tell her to research the laws before moving to another country. I would tell her to keep her own money, her own passport, her own escape plan. I would tell her to never give up her independence, her career, her connection to home. But most of all, I would tell her to think very carefully before having children with someone from a country that does not share her values about women's rights, about custody, about equality. Because once those children exist, you are bound to that country and that person in ways you cannot fully understand until it is too late. I am not saying do not marry across cultures. Cross-cultural relationships can be beautiful and enriching. But I am saying, go into them with your eyes open. Understand the legal implications. Understand what happens if things go wrong. Understand that the law may not protect you the way you think it will. Egypt is not a Hague Convention country, which means there is no international treaty mechanism to deal with parental abduction cases involving Egypt. But even countries that are Hague Convention countries, the convention can be weaponized against mothers fleeing abuse, as I learned in Spain. The Hague Convention was designed to prevent parents from kidnapping their children across borders. It says that if a child is wrongfully removed from their country of habitual residence, they should be returned so that custody can be decided in their home country. It sounds reasonable. It sounds fair. But in practice, it does not account for mothers fleeing violence. It does not account for situations where going through proper legal channels in the home country is impossible or dangerous. It does not account for the power imbalances that exist in many countries. When I fled to Spain, I thought I was escaping to safety. Instead, I got caught in a legal system that said my reasons for leaving did not matter, that procedure was more important than safety, that Egypt's right to determine custody of Egyptian children trumped my right to protect them from a harmful environment. And when I was sent back to Egypt, I found myself in a legal system that heavily favors fathers, especially Egyptian fathers. A system where my foreignness was used against me, where my attempt to leave the country was seen as proof that I was unstable and could not be trusted. I have learned, too late, that there are hundreds of mothers in situations like mine all over the world. Mothers who fled with their children and were forced to return. Mothers who are now fighting for scraps of time with children they once cared for full-time. Mothers who have been labeled as abductors and kidnappers when they were really just trying to survive. The system is broken. It is broken in ways that specifically harm women fleeing abuse. Because we are told to go through proper channels, but those channels often do not work. We are told to document everything, but documentation is often not believed. We are told to trust the courts, but the courts often side with fathers, especially when there are cultural or religious factors at play. I want anyone reading this or hearing this to understand what I learned too late. If you are in a situation like I was, trapped in a country where you have no support, married to someone who is controlling or harming, with children you desperately want to protect, there are no good options. Staying is dangerous. Leaving may result in losing your children. The legal system is not designed to help you. It is designed to maintain the status quo, to defer to the father's country, to prioritize procedure over safety. I am not telling you what to do. I cannot tell you what to do. Every situation is different. Every country is different. Every abuser is different. But I am telling you to be informed, to research the laws before it is too late, to have a plan, to keep money aside that your partner does not know about, to maintain connections to your home country, to document everything, even if you do not think you will ever need it. And if you do decide to leave, know that there will be consequences. Know that the legal system may punish you for it. Know that you may lose custody. Know that it may haunt you for the rest of your life. I made my choice. I tried to save my children by taking them out of Egypt. And I lost them anyway. Not completely. But I lost the right to raise them day to day, to make decisions about their lives, to be their primary parent. Was it the right choice? I will never know. Because I do not know what would have happened if I had stayed. Maybe things would have gotten better. Maybe Kareem would have changed. Maybe I would have found a way to make it work. Or maybe things would have gotten worse. Maybe the violence would have escalated. Maybe I would be dead now. Maybe my children would be traumatized in even worse ways. There is no way to know. There are no do-overs. There is only living with the consequences of the choices we make when we are desperate and afraid. 3 years have passed since that terrible day in Madrid when I was arrested and my daughter was taken from me. 3 years of limited visitation, of watching my children grow up without me, of living in a city I never wanted to live in, tethered to a man I tried so hard to escape. Layla will be 13 in 3 years. Under Egyptian custody law, at 13, girls can choose which parent they want to live with. I live in hope that when that day comes, Layla will choose me, that she will remember that I love her, that everything I did was to try to protect her. But I am also realistic. Layla has been raised primarily by Kareem and Amina for the past 3 years. That is where her daily life is. That is where her friends are, her school, her routine. I am the disruption, the weekend visitor, the one who took her away and caused all this upheaval in the first place. She may not choose me, and if she does not, I will have to accept it and try to maintain whatever relationship she will allow me to have. Omar will have a choice at a different age. I am not sure exactly when under Egyptian law, somewhere around 11 to 13. He is even less likely to choose me because he was younger when this all happened, has fewer memories of our life before. So I wait. I show up for every visitation. I try to make the time we have together meaningful. I tell my children I love them every chance I get. I hope that someday they will understand why I did what I did, even if they cannot understand it now. I also try to rebuild my own life, as much as I can within the constraints of living in Cairo. I have made some friends, other expat women who understand what it is like to feel displaced and powerless. I have found a therapist, an Egyptian woman who trained in the US and understands both cultures. She helps me process the grief, the anger, the guilt. The guilt is the hardest part. The constant question of whether I made the right choice, whether I should have just stayed and tried to make it work, whether my attempt to save my children actually harmed them more. My therapist says I need to forgive myself, that I made the best decision I could with the information I had at the time, that I was trying to protect my children from a situation that felt dangerous, that even though it did not work out the way I hoped, my intentions were good. But forgiveness is hard. How do you forgive yourself for losing your children? I write letters sometimes. Letters that I will give to Layla and Omar when they are older. Letters explaining what happened from my perspective. Letters telling them how much I love them, how much I wanted to give them a better life. Letters apologizing for the pain my choices caused them. I do not know if they will ever read these letters. I do not know if they will care, but I write them anyway, because I need them to know. I need them to understand that every decision I made, even the ones that turned out badly, were made out of love. My parents ask me all the time when I am coming home, when I am bringing the children back to America. I tell them I do not know. Maybe never. This is my reality now. Cairo is where my children are, so Cairo is where I have to be. My mother cries. She says it is not fair, that I should not have to live like this, that there must be something more we can do. But there is not. We have exhausted every legal option. We have spent every dollar we could scrape together. We have lost every battle. My father wants to go to the media, to make a big public case out of this, to shame the Egyptian government and the Spanish government and anyone else involved. But my lawyer advised against it. She said if I make Kareem look bad publicly, he will retaliate by making it even harder for me to see the children. That I need to keep my head down and play by the rules if I want to maintain even the limited access I have. So I stay quiet. I do not make waves. I do what I'm told. Because the alternative is losing even the little bit I have left. I follow the news about other Hague Convention cases, about other mothers fighting custody battles across borders. Every time I see a story about a mother who won, who got her children back, who successfully fought against an unfair ruling, I feel a surge of hope. Maybe the system is changing. Maybe courts are starting to understand the complexities of these situations. But then I see more stories about mothers who lost. Mothers who were sent back to abusive situations. Mothers who lost custody because they dared to flee. Mothers whose children were used as weapons against them. And I realize that for every success story, there are dozens of failures. The system is not changing fast enough. And even when it does change, it will be too late for mothers like me. Too late for Layla and Omar, who have already grown up in this broken system. I want to end this story with hope. I want to say that things are getting better, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that justice will prevail. But I do not know if that is true. What I do know is that I am still here, still fighting, still showing up for my children every chance I get, still believing that love matters, even when the law says it does not. I know that I am not alone, that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of mothers like me around the world. Mothers who tried to protect their children and were punished for it. Mothers who are living in countries they never wanted to live in, trapped by custody orders and legal systems that do not value them. I know that our stories need to be told, that people need to understand what happens when you marry across borders without understanding the legal implications. That young women need to be warned before they fall in love with someone from a country that does not share their values about women's rights and children's rights. And I know that the system needs to change, that courts need to take domestic violence more seriously in international custody cases, that the Hague Convention needs to be reformed to better protect fleeing mothers, that countries need to cooperate better to ensure that the best interests of children, not just jurisdictional technicalities, guide custody decisions. But change is slow. And in the meantime, mothers and children are suffering. This is my story. But it is also the story of countless other mothers. And it is a story that needs to be heard. If you are going through something similar, know that you are not alone. There are support groups online where you can connect with other mothers in similar situations. There are lawyers who specialize in international custody law. There are organizations working to reform the system. You do not have to face this alone. And if you are someone who has never experienced this, someone who cannot imagine being in this situation, I ask you to care, to listen, to try to understand, to support efforts to reform international custody laws, to speak up when you see injustice. Because children should not be used as weapons. Mothers should not be punished for trying to protect their children. And love should not be destroyed by legal technicalities. I thought taking my daughter to Spain would save us. Instead, it cost me everything. But I would still do anything to keep my children safe. That is what mothers do. We make impossible choices in impossible situations, and we live with the consequences, no matter how devastating they are. Layla and Omar are my world, even though I only see them every other weekend, even though I am not the one raising them day to day, even though they are growing up in a world I did not choose for them. They are my world, and I will keep fighting for them, keep showing up for them, keep loving them with everything I have. That is all I can do. And somehow, it has to be enough. If this story has touched you, if it has opened your eyes to the reality of international custody battles and the ways the legal system can fail mothers fleeing abuse, please share it. Help spread awareness. Help other women understand what they might be facing before it is too late. And if you have experienced something similar, if you are a mother who has been through a Hague case or an international custody battle, please share your story in the comments. Let other mothers know they are not alone. Let the world know what is happening. Like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about mothers fighting impossible battles across international borders. Turn on notifications so you do not miss future stories. And let me know in the comments where you are listening from, what your experience has been, what you think needs to change about international custody laws. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring about what happens to mothers and children caught in these impossible situations. Thank you for being here.